3,000 years ago, a guy basically wrote a corporate employee handbook. So, meticulously perfect that it held a massive continent-spanning empire together for centuries. And he did it without a standing police force.
Well, a centralized police force anyway.
Right, right. No centralized police force. For generations, this handbook was basically the ultimate cheat code for absolute power. Until, of course, the employees figured out how to weaponize that exact same handbook to burn the whole company down to the studs. Welcome to the deep dive.
Good evening.
Sit down, pour yourself a drink. You sitting there. You look like you need one. You sit here at the bar staring at the condensation on your glass, and you think about permanence.
People always want to believe things last.
Exactly. You look out the window at these towering skyscrapers, these trillion-dollar holding companies with their slick logos and their core values etched into the frosted glass of their boardrooms. You look at them and you think, that right there is a machine that will run forever.
Only a fool believes in permanent architecture. I mean, every foundation settles eventually.
Every single one. The truth is, every monolithic institution is just one bad Tuesday away from a spectacular meltdown. And usually, the executives at the top, they don't even see the structural rot until the ceiling is already collapsing on their mahogany desks.
Too insulated.
Totally insulated. So I've been spending the last few weeks digging through a stack of sources, ancient bamboo slips, bronze inscriptions, translations of Simakian's records of the Grand Historian, and some modern historical analyses.
It's quite a lot of reading.
Oh, it's dense. But tonight, I'm going to extract a story from these texts for you. It is the ultimate business case study. We are going to look at the rise and fall of what I consider to be the most fascinating, ruthless, and ultimately doomed startup in human history.
You're framing the establishment and the collapse of the Western Zhou dynasty as a corporate life cycle.
I am framing it exactly as it was. Because look, the mechanics of human ambition, greed, paranoia, they haven't changed one bit in 3 millennia. Ambition is ambition, whether you're wearing a bespoke Italian wool suit or, 20 pounds of ancient bronze armor. The stakes are the same. Blood and resources.
Exactly. Blood and resources. So to understand the scale of what we're talking about, you have to picture the market before our startup even arrived. A long, long time ago, roughly the 11th century BCE, there was this massive, entrenched legacy enterprise. We'll call them Legacy Shang.
Shang Dynasty. The old guard.
The old guard. They had all the market share. They had the legacy infrastructure, the absolute monopoly on bronze metallurgy, and totally unmatched brand recognition. But their corporate culture was, frankly, a nightmare.
Oh, fair. That's putting it mildly.
Right. They managed their subsidiaries through sheer terror. We're talking literal human sacrifice to keep the branch managers in line. The CEO of Shang, King's Grow, he was this bloated, tyrannical megalomaniac.
He was known for incredible excess.
Incredible excess. Simakian talks about how he spent company resources on literal lakes of wine and forests of hanging meat, all while the outer territories basically starved.
A monopoly maintained by violence eventually exhausts its own capital. The Shang relied entirely on fear and, ancestral superstition. Yeah, explain that part, the superstition stuff.
They believed their right to rule was inherently tied to their bloodline and their gods. They didn't feel they had to earn loyalty. They believed they owned it.
Right, they got comfortable, they got arrogant. And while they were busy resting on their laurels and torturing their mid-level managers, a hungry, aggressive new startup emerged from the fringes. A little outfit from the western frontier called Zhou.
Led by King Wu?
Startup Zhou was led by a visionary founder named King Wu. Now, King Wu wasn't interested in just competing with Legacy Shang. He didn't want a little 10% slice of the market share.
He wanted the whole board.
He looked at the bloated, rotting carcass of the Shang monopoly and decided to launch an all-out, winner-take-all market war.
What history calls the Battle of Mue.
The Battle of Mu. The ultimate hostile takeover. King Wu gathers a coalition of disgruntled Shang subsidiaries, marches his armies east, and hits the Shang headquarters with everything he has.
And the Shang defenses just crumbled.
Completely. The Shang forces, many of whom were essentially unpaid interns and slaves just forced to fight, they turn their weapons around and join the startup right there on the battlefield.
They saw which way the wind was blowing.
Yeah, wouldn't you? So King Zhou of Shang realizes he's lost the board, lost the company, and he sets his own palace on fire, burning himself alive with his jewels. Startup Zhou wins.
They absorb the assets.
They gut the C-suite of Shang, absorb all the assets, and officially cement themselves at the absolute top spot. The IPO is a smash hit. The valuation is through the roof.
The establishment of the Western Zhou.
King Wu and his executive team are popping the Bronze Age equivalent of champagne, celebrating the fact that they now own the entire known world.
But, liquidating a rival is entirely different from governing their assets.
And here's the brutal reality of the business world. Celebrating the IPO is the shortest phase of any company's life cycle, because every single new enterprise, no matter how successful on paper, is just one bad day away from a catastrophic leadership vacuum.
And for the Zhou, that bad day came almost immediately.
Right after they get big, right after King Wu consolidates all this unprecedented power, a massive crisis hits. The visionary founder, the guy whose sheer force of will pushed the company to the top, he dies.
Just 2 or 3 years after the conquest?
Drops dead of illness and exhaustion. He spent his whole life building this thing and boom, gone.
He removed the central pillar of the old world, but died before the cement could dry on the new one.
Wet cement. And
Yeah.
somebody just drove a dump truck right through it. Because naturally, when the founder dies, the board looks to the succession plan. Who is stepping into the corner office?
King Cheng, his son.
Yeah, King Cheng.
Yeah.
But the heir to the company isn't a seasoned executive. He isn't some battle-tested general manager who fought at Muye. He is a child, a literal boy.
That is a very dangerous position for a martial society.
I want you, the listener sitting here with us, to take a sip of your drink and really put yourself in this scenario. You are an investor in this massive tech unicorn. It just went public. It just violently acquired its biggest rival.
And it oversees millions of hostile former Shang employees.
Massive overhead. Brutal, barbarian competitors waiting on the borders. And the board of directors sits down at the huge mahogany table, looks at the new CEO, and realizes the kid's feet don't even touch the floor.
In a Bronze Age martial society, a boy king possesses absolutely zero intrinsic authority.
Right, because authority back then wasn't just a title.
No, authority in this era was derived from military prowess and the ability to personally command fear and respect. A child can project neither of those things.
If I'm an investor, I'm pulling my money out immediately. It is absolute, unadulterated panic. How do you maintain market confidence when the person authorized to sign the corporate checks still has a bedtime?
The whispers would start immediately among the regional lords.
The short sellers are circling, and keep in mind, the Shang elites aren't dead. King Wu didn't kill all of them, he demoted them.
He left Wu Gang, the son of the old Shang king, in charge of the old Shang capital.
Right, as a kind of figurehead to appease the legacy employees. So you have a massive population of bitter, recently conquered Shang loyalists watching a child take over their conqueror's empire.
It's a powder keg.
This is the most dangerous moment for any institution. It's that terrifying window where the sheer massive scale of the operation vastly outpaces the experience and capability of the leader. The machine is too big for the pilot.
The crisis was not merely about competence, though. It was a crisis of legitimacy.
How do you mean?
Well, in a newly formed power vacuum, loyalty is not a transferable asset. Just because the regional warlords and the allied tribes respected King Wu, it did not mean that loyalty automatically flowed down to his child. Loyalty has to be enforced.
Exactly. Loyalty is not a trust fund. You can't just inherit it. So you have the sprawling, volatile company and a CEO who needs a nap after lunch. The kid cannot run the daily operations.
He cannot stare down the aggressive regional managers.
Someone has to step in. Someone has to grab the steering wheel before the whole company drives off a cliff. And that brings us to the boardroom drama and the entrance of the ultimate co-founder.
The Duke of Zhou, Jizan.
History knows him as the Duke of Zhou, King Wu's brother. He was effectively the COO of Startup Zhou. If you look at the original pitch deck for this dynasty, the Duke of Zhou is the strongest partner on the founding team.
He drafted the strategy for the conquest.
He was right there in the trenches during the hostile takeover. He knows the business inside and out. He has the respect of the troops and the market. He is the heavy hitter. Now, let me ask you, human nature being what it is, 99 times out of 100, what does the powerful, brilliant COO do when the main boss dies and leaves an incompetent kid in charge?
They execute an internal coup. They sideline the child, claim the title for themselves, and consolidate power. It is the most rational path to stability.
It is the obvious play. You walk into the boardroom and you say, listen, the kid's not ready. The market is panicking. For the good of the shareholders, I am taking over. I am the new CEO.
But the Duke of Zhou does something that still baffles historians.
He chooses a much, much harder path. Instead of usurping the throne and taking the crown, C. McKeon records that he steps in as what the history books call the regent.
Acting CEO, essentially.
In our corporate world, acting CEO, the temporary custodian. He essentially announces to the empire, I am going to run the day-to-day. I am going to hold this entire massive, fragile system together, but I am doing it for the kid. When King Cheng is old enough, I will hand the keys back.
It is a profound organizational anomaly.
Makes no sense.
He assumes all the risk, all the stress, and all the target status of the top job, while deliberately capping his own upward mobility. He takes the liability without claiming the ultimate equity.
It's a heroic act. I mean, on paper, it's the ultimate display of corporate loyalty. But look around this bar. Look at the people in the world today. Do you think, for one single second, that anyone actually believed he was doing it out of the goodness of his heart?
No. Suspicion in an environment of high stakes and high ambiguity is not a character flaw. It is a survival mechanism.
It's guaranteed, and the sources are very clear on what happened next. The other shareholder-level relatives, specifically King Wu's other brothers, the uncles of the child king, took one look at the Duke of Zhou controlling the corporate checkbook, and they called absolute bull.
The three guards, Guanshu, Kaishu, and Hushu.
The three guards. After the takeover of Shang, King Wu had stationed these three brothers out in the Eastern Territories. Their specific job description was to babysit Wu Ging.
The heir of the legacy Shang Empire.
Right, to make sure the Shang remnants didn't try to launch a counter-takeover. So these three guards are sitting out east, commanding massive garrisons, and they hear that the Duke of Zhou has made himself regent.
They start having side meetings.
They are whispering by the water cooler. They're saying, come on, he's acting CEO or regent, please. He's just keeping the seat warm for himself. He's slowly pushing the kid out. He's secretly just trying to make himself the permanent boss.
And if they genuinely believed the Duke of Zhou was executing a slow-motion coup, their subsequent actions, while treasonous, were entirely rational from their perspective. They viewed themselves as defending the legitimate lineage.
The cynical truth of human nature is that no one believes a truly powerful person is acting purely out of duty. If someone has total, unchecked control of the company's assets, the default assumption is that they are going to steal the company.
And this fundamental lack of trust at the executive level is what fractures the foundation.
The three guards didn't just complain to HR, they took catastrophic action. They armed themselves and gathered their factions.
They allied with the very enemy they were stationed to suppress.
This is the craziest part of the sources. The uncles, King Wu's own flesh and blood, hate and distrust the Duke of Zhou so much that they form a strategic alliance with Wu Gang, the son of the Shang tyrant their own brother just overthrew.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Exactly. They tell the Shang remnants, hey, we'll help you get your company back as long as you help us kill the Duke of Zhou. This suspicion, this paranoia in the boardroom triggered a massive internal rebellion historically known as the Rebellion of the Three Guards.
The ultimate shareholder revolt.
They tried to violently oust the regent right when the company was at its most vulnerable.
What is deeply ironic here is the cause and effect loop. The Duke of Zhou's attempt to stabilize the company is precisely what triggered its first major civil war.
His intervention created the perception of a threat,
which then materialized into an actual threat.
The classic self-fulfilling prophecy of the boardroom. You try to stop a panic, and your actions cause the panic. So the empire is splintering. The East is an open rebellion. But see, this is where the Duke of Zhou proves why he isn't just a footnote in history.
He doesn't fold.
He doesn't call a crisis PR firm. He meets them head-on. Sima Qian details a brutal, grinding 3-year military campaign. The Duke of Zhou marches the royal armies east.
He has to systematically conquer his own brothers.
He has to uproot the Shang remnants permanently. It wasn't a quick boardroom spat. It was 3 years of mud, blood, and bronze. He executes his brother Guanshu. He exiles Kaishu. He completely neutralizes the internal threat.
But he's standing there in the Eastern Plains, looking at the ruins, and he realizes something crucial.
Putting out fires is not a sustainable business model.
Exactly. You can't just run around with a fire extinguisher your whole career.
The Duke of Zhou realized that the problem wasn't just a few jealous uncles. The problem was the system itself. The old tribal methods of governance, where you just rely on your brothers to hold territory because you trust them, that system was dead.
It died the second his brothers allied with the enemy.
The company was just too big, the communication lines were too long. If they didn't fundamentally change how they operated, the next rebellion would destroy them completely. So he decides to clean house.
He decides that the Western Zhou needs a completely new operating system to survive.
This is where the historical narrative shifts from crisis management to profound institutional design. The Duke of Zhou transitions from a military firefighter to a master systems architect.
He rewrote the code.
He absolutely rewrote the code. The sources are incredibly detailed on this. He didn't just win a war. He fundamentally rewired the psychology and structure of Chinese civilization. And he built this new operating system on three massive pillars.
Let's break these down.
Yeah, let's break them down because honestly, they are brilliant. Even today, modern corporations use variations of these exact same concepts. They just dress them up in corporate jargon. Let's look at pillar one.
The institutionalization of the Fenjian system, often translated as enfeoffment.
Enfeoffment. I mean, it's a heavy academic word that makes my eyes glaze over, but let's translate it into business terms. It's a corporate franchising model.
A very apt analogy.
The Duke of Zhou looks at the map. Startup Zhou has acquired an unfathomable amount of territory from legacy Shang. It stretches from the Western Highlands all the way to the Eastern Ocean.
It is way too big to micromanage from one single headquarters in the West.
In a world without highways, telegraphs, or the internet, communication takes months. Logistics are a nightmare. If a rebellion starts in the east, by the time HQ hears about it and mobilizes an army, the rebels have already won.
So he splits the massive company into smaller, manageable regional branches.
He decentralizes the operational burden, but he's attempting to maintain structural unity at the same time.
He grants tracts of land, populations, and ceremonial authority to his most trusted allies.
He creates franchises. But I need you to understand, this wasn't just handing someone a piece of paper and saying, good luck. The sources describe a deeply physical, binding contract.
The ritual of enfeoffment.
Right. The Duke takes his loyal relatives and the highly decorated employees, the meritorious ministers like Jiang Zia, who was granted the state of Qi, and he hands them a mandate. He gives them the clod of earth from the central altar, some ritual bronze vessels, a flag, and a localized military quota.
He says, congratulations, you are now the regional manager.
I am sending you out into hostile, unconquered territory. Build a walled city. Subdue the local barbarians. Build your own local workforce. Generate your own revenue stream.
But you owe HQ annual dividends in the form of tribute, and if HQ goes to war, your franchise must provide troops.
It was armed colonization masquerading as administrative delegation. By planting these allied states like Lu, Qi, Yan, and Jin throughout the hostile eastern plains, he created a network of fortified garrisons.
It served as a buffer and a surveillance network for the central court.
But see, that doesn't make any sense to me. I look at that and think, you're telling me he franchised out the kingdom, gave his cousins their own private standing armies, told them to go build their own economies, and just, what, trusted them?
You think it sounds like a terrible business plan?
We just spent 10 minutes talking about how his own brothers tried to kill him. Why on earth would he create dozens of heavily armed regional warlords?
You're thinking like a modern auditor who assumes centralized control is always possible. Think like a Bronze Age architect. Decentralized defense was the only defense.
Because they couldn't afford a standing army everywhere.
Exactly. The royal court could not afford to station troops everywhere. They had to rely on the self-interest of the regional lords. If a lord wanted to keep his wealth and his life, he had to defend his franchise territory. And by defending his territory, he inadvertently defended the empire.
Okay, I see that. It solves the geography problem. It solves the logistics problem. But it introduces a massive new headache. How do you stop your newly empowered regional managers who are suddenly very far away from going rogue?
How do you keep them aligned with the core mission when you aren't there to watch them?
Right. You construct a psychological leash, which brings us to his second and perhaps most enduring innovation, pillar number 2.
The system of Liu, rights and music.
Rights and music. Today, tech companies spend millions on corporate culture. They have ping pong tables, mandatory mindfulness retreats, and thick HR handbooks outlining their core values.
All designed to align behavior.
It's all designed to make you feel like you belong to something bigger than yourself so you don't ask for a raise. Well, the Duke of Zhou invented the ultimate employee handbook. The system of Liu explicitly, painstakingly codified who is allowed to do what.
It established a hyper-strict hierarchy and crystal-clear levels of status.
It was far more pervasive than an HR handbook, though.
It was a comprehensive sumptuary law combined with a socio-religious framework. It dictated the exact number of dancers a lord could have at a banquet. It dictated the color of their robes, the size of their courtyards.
And crucially, the number of bronze ding tripods they were permitted to use in ancestral sacrifices. I was reading about this in the sources. Sima goes into this, and it blew my mind.
The bronze vessels are fascinating.
The king, the central authority, gets to use 9 ding vessels. A regional duke gets to use 7. A mid-level minister gets 5. A low-level official gets 3. And these aren't little teacups.
No, they are massive, incredibly heavy, technologically complex bronze cauldrons used to cook meat for the spirits.
Bronze was the military and technological currency of the era. Controlling bronze meant controlling weapons.
By dictating that a duke could only cast 7 ceremonial vessels, the central court was indirectly limiting their consumption of strategic resources under the guise of religious propriety.
It is absolute genius. It was a dress code, a resource management tool, and a behavioral matrix all rolled into one. And you know why it worked? Because it takes the brutal, ugly reality of raw power and dresses it up in a tuxedo.
It makes the hierarchy feel natural.
Yes. If you are a regional manager with your 7 vessels, listening to your specifically mandated 6 rows of dancers, you aren't just obeying orders because the king has a bigger army. You're obeying because it's the proper way the universe functions.
It's polite. And here's the kicker. It makes ambition visually obvious.
Right. If a regional duke suddenly decides to use 9 bronze vessels instead of 7, or hires 8 rows of dancers instead of 6, it's not just a fashion faux pas. He isn't just being tacky.
He is visually, undeniably declaring war on the central hierarchy.
Everyone sees it immediately. His neighbors see it. His own subordinates see it. And because the rules are so internalized, his neighbors will turn on him, not even necessarily because HQ told them to, but because he broke the sacred rules of the culture.
The culture polices itself.
The genius of the rights and music system is that it replaced the need for constant, exhausting military enforcement with psychological and structural order.
If everyone internalizes the rules, obedience seems like the natural, reasonable state of the world, rather than an imposition of force by a conqueror. It legitimizes the hierarchy.
It is beautiful. It really is. You've got the franchise model distributing the workload and the defense. You've got the rights and music creating a flawless corporate culture that polices itself.
But the Duke of Zhou isn't stupid.
No, he just fought a 3-year war against his own family. He knows you still need a massive stick to go with the cultural carrot. So we get to pillar number 3.
Central authority.
Central authority, ensuring that the center of gravity remains at headquarters no matter how large the periphery grows.
Despite franchising out the business, the Duke of Zhou made one thing abundantly, terrifyingly clear. Headquarters is still the absolute boss.
And he did this through 2 methods. First, he kept the biggest army. He maintained the 6 armies of the West at the old capital, Haojing, and he built a massive secondary capital in the east, Luoyi, where he stationed the 8 armies of Qing.
So HQ always had overwhelming military superiority.
But the second method was even more brilliant. He invented a new board of directors.
He articulated the concept of Tianming, the mandate of heaven.
The mandate of heaven. Let's go back to Legacy Shang for a second. The Shang CEO claimed he ruled because he was a direct blood descendant of the divine spirits. His power was inherent. You couldn't argue with it.
The Duke of Zhou looks at this and realizes it's a flawed model.
Because if you overthrow a guy who claims to be a god, you look like a blasphemer. So the Duke of Zhou introduces a paradigm shift. He says, no. The CEO doesn't rule because he's a god. The CEO rules because heaven, the ultimate impersonal moral force of the universe, chose him.
Heaven looked down at the Shang, saw they had terrible corporate governance and lacked virtue, and so heaven fired them and gave the mandate to the Zhou.
It is one of the most consequential political philosophical innovations in human history. By decoupling the right to rule from strict bloodline divinity and attaching it to virtue and moral conduct, he justified the Zhou conquest.
But critically, he also established a mechanism for future accountability.
Right. If the regional franchises rebel against the Zhou King, they aren't just rebelling against a guy in a palace. They are rebelling against the moral order of the universe. Heaven chose the CEO. You don't mess with heaven.
But, and this is the terrifying part of the mandate, it means the CEO can be fired.
Exactly. If the Zhou King loses his virtue, heaven will revoke the mandate and give it to someone else. It forced the central authority to at least pretend to care about the people.
The central authority was positioned not just as a stronger military force, but as the exclusive moral and ritual conduit to the cosmos.
The regional managers derived their legitimacy, their right to hold their franchises, solely from their ongoing connection to that center.
The mandate was everything.
I have to step back and marvel at the elegance of this design. Think about it. You sit back at the bar, you look at this blueprint, and it looks absolutely perfect on paper.
It was a very robust architecture.
The workload is distributed, the regional lords are fortified, everyone has a physical, heavy bronze rule book that tells them exactly how to behave. The culture polices the ambition, and HQ holds the moral high ground and the biggest armies.
It's the kind of org chart that would make a modern management consultant weep with joy.
And it worked. After the Duke of Zhou handed power back to King Cheng, the Western Zhou experienced generations of stability and expansion. Sima Qian writes about how peaceful it was for decades.
It was structurally sound for the precise moment it was created. It solved the immediate crises of geography, delegation, and legitimacy. The system thrived in the short term.
Right, it solved the present. But as any software engineer will tell you, every complex code, no matter how beautifully written, has a hidden bug.
And sometimes that bug doesn't trigger until the system has been running for a long, long time.
And this is where things start to get really relatable for anyone who has ever watched a great company slowly lose its soul.
Because systems are static, but reality is fluid. The variable that the Duke of Zhou's operating system could not control for was time.
Time. The ultimate system killer. The hidden vulnerability, the fatal flaw in the Duke of Zhou's flawless operating system was that it relied almost entirely on interpersonal relationships.
It relied on the patriarchal clan system, the Zongfa.
Right, the Zongfa. It assumed that the bonds of family and shared history would hold the structure together forever. And those things, they have an expiration date.
Blood is a depreciating asset. Proximity breeds loyalty. Distance breeds autonomy.
A depreciating asset. Man, that is a cold way to put it, but it is 100% accurate. Let's look at the source material's brilliant observation on this generational decay. Ancient texts track this dilution perfectly over the course of 2 or 3 centuries.
Let's track the timeline. Think about the first generation.
The founders, the brothers and uncles who were granted the initial franchises, the guys who actually fought alongside King Wu and the Duke of Zhou.
The ones who packed up their families, marched east, and built those walled cities in the wilderness.
They are highly loyal. They look at the kid CEO back at headquarters and they say, I know him. I held him when he was a baby. That is my brother's company. We bled together to build this thing.
The bond is visceral. It's real.
When HQ asks for tribute, they send it gladly. When HQ asks for troops, they march. The system works perfectly because the personal emotional relationship enforces the corporate structure.
The emotional investment aligns perfectly with the structural requirement. The lived experience validates the mandate.
But then the founders die.
And you transition to the second and third generations.
The original founders die off, their kids take over the regional branches, and the kid at HQ passes the baton to his kid. Now the relationship starts to cool off.
The new regional manager in the state of Qi looks at headquarters in Haojing.
And he says, well, that's my dad's acquaintance. I mean, we send a Christmas card. We see them at the annual ancestral sacrifice. I respect them, sure, because my dad told me to.
The loyalty isn't blood deep anymore. It's just polite obligation.
It has transitioned from a lived emotional reality to a social habit. And habits are infinitely easier to break than bonds forged in survival. Which brings us to the 4th, 5th, and 6th generations.
The late Western Zhou.
This is where the bug completely crashes the system. Total alienation. We are now 200 years removed from the IPO. The great-great-great-grandson of the original regional manager is sitting in his massive palace in the state of Jin.
He's looking out over his massive, thriving economy.
He gets a memo from the great-great-great-grandson of the original CEO at headquarters, demanding more troops and more bronze. And the regional manager looks at the memo, tosses it in the fire, and says, "Excuse me, who are you? We aren't close.
I've never even been to the Western capital.
I don't know you, I don't care about you, and why on earth am I taking orders from you?"
The structural requirement for obedience remains on paper, but the emotional and interpersonal foundation that supported it has entirely evaporated.
Just think about your own extended family for a second. Really, I want you to sit there, look at your drink, and think about it. How close are you, truly, with your grandfather's cousin's kids?
Most people couldn't pick them out of a police lineup.
Exactly. You might share a last name, you might have the same weird family nose, but would you hand over 30% of your paycheck to them every month just because of a shared ancestor from 2 centuries ago?
You'd call the cops.
Hell no. You'd call the cops. The system assumed that bloodlines would maintain loyalty forever. That was the assumption baked into the Zongfa clan code. And it is a massive terminal oversight.
It is the fundamental flaw of attempting to scale a family dynamic to the size of an empire.
Just doesn't work.
A family operates on intimacy, shared experience, and physical proximity. An empire operates on abstraction, bureaucracy, and force. Trust simply does not scale across generations without active, continuous enforcement. You cannot institutionalize affection.
You cannot institutionalize affection. Wow, that should be carved into marble in every boardroom in the world, because that's exactly what the Zhou tried to do.
They tried to legislate love.
They tried to make a rule that said you must love and obey your fifth cousin twice removed forever. And human nature just doesn't work that way.
Oh.
So as these blood ties thinned out, as the generations passed, the regional branch managers stopped looking at the family tree and started looking at their own balance sheets.
And that leads us to the catastrophic shift in the company culture.
The center could not hold because the periphery had grown too heavy and the tethers had frayed.
The tethers didn't just fray, they snapped.
The franchises, these regional states like Qi, Lu, Chu, and Jin, they weren't just sitting idle for 200 years. They were operating in the real world. Sima Qian details how they were fighting border skirmishes against barbarian tribes.
They were expanding their own agricultural lands.
Their populations boomed. They developed their own local iron and salt monopolies. They hired their own private security forces, which slowly morphed into massive standing armies, and their bank accounts swelled.
They became economically and militarily self-sufficient. The initial dependence on the central court for protection and legitimacy inverted.
Exactly. And when you are completely self-sufficient, you start asking some very dangerous questions. The regional managers are sitting there looking at their granaries bursting with food, looking at their thousands of battle-hardened soldiers, and they think,
Why am I sending dividends to HQ?
what is headquarters actually doing for me? I could be my own boss. I am my own boss in everything but name.
The franchises were now collectively, and in some cases individually, stronger than the central authority.
And it wasn't just that the franchises were getting stronger. Headquarters was actively, embarrassingly falling apart. It's like watching a legacy tech giant rot from the inside.
The central authority, the descendants of King Wu and the Duke of Zhou, lost the hunger.
They got comfortable. We're talking catastrophic leadership failures recorded in the sources. You have King Zhou, who took the royal army south on a vanity campaign and drowned in a river, losing half the central military in one day.
A massive loss of central power.
Then you have King Li, who was so tyrannical and corrupt that the citizens of his own capital rioted and exiled him, leading to a 14-year period where the company had no CEO at all. The Gong'er Regency.
The central leadership became insulated from the realities of their own empire. They lived in an echo chamber of their own design, relying on the illusion of their authority, failing to realize that the actual physical mechanics of their power, their armies, and their wealth had rusted away.
They assumed the rights and music would protect them.
They really did.
Right. The rights and music. The famous employee handbook. This is the craziest part of the whole story, and the most painfully relatable if you've ever worked in a failing, toxic company. I want to paint a picture of this late Western Zoo corporate environment for you.
The rules of rights and music technically still existed. Everyone knew them.
The manuals were still printed, but nobody actually followed them in their hearts.
The forms were rigorously observed, but the substance was entirely abandoned.
It was an illusion of order. You'd have these massive, elaborate boardroom meetings, these summit gatherings between the central king and the regional lords, and on the surface, the optics were flawless.
Everyone bowed at exactly the right angle.
Everyone wore the perfectly mandated jade pendants and hats. The music played at the exact right tempo. The regional lords used their mandated 7 bronze ding vessels. Everyone was extremely suffocatingly polite.
But under the table,
they are viciously kicking each other in the shins. They are entirely focused on their own selfish agendas, whispering to each other, plotting to annex their neighbor's territory the second the meeting adjourns.
the Chinese historical tradition has a very specific, devastating 4-character phrase for this exact phenomenon. Li Beng Yu Huai.
Li Beng Yu Hui. Break that down for me because it sounds like the title of a horror movie for bureaucrats.
It translates directly to the collapse of rights and the ruin of music, or rights corrupted, music broken.
Wow.
It describes a society where the institutional structure remains visible as a facade, a hollow shell, but the moral, ethical, and practical authority behind it has completely rotted away. The vocabulary of loyalty is still spoken, but no one believes the words.
The collapse of rights in music. The employee handbook becomes a joke. The core values carved on the lobby wall become a punchline that the employees roll their eyes at.
It's the point of no return.
When you reach that state, when the polite facade is the only thing left holding the building up, the end is not just near, it has already happened. You're just waiting for a strong wind to knock the building over.
Because when the central boss can no longer give orders that anyone respects,
And the local managers politely refuse to listen while sharpening their swords in the dark, the entire system auto-switches its core mode.
a paradigm shift becomes unavoidable. The operating system encounters a fatal error, the facade crumbles, and the system reboots into a different state entirely.
And the strong wind that knocked the building over came in 771 BCE. The final Western Zhou CEO, King Yu, alienates his most powerful remaining allies by playing succession games with his wives.
A fatal error in judgment.
The sources say he lit the warning beacon fires just to make his favorite concubine laugh. He treated the emergency defense network like a toy. So when a barbarian coalition, the Quanong, actually attacks the capital, no one comes to help.
The regional managers look at the beacon fires, shrug, and stay home.
The capital is sacked, King Yu is killed, headquarters is burned to the ground.
The surviving royal family is forced to flee eastward to the secondary capital, Lue, establishing what is known as the Eastern Zhou dynasty. But it is a dynasty in name only.
It's a shell corporation. The king is now just a mascot. The operating system officially switched modes from cooperation to competition. And folks, that is a terrifying switch to flip.
It marks the definitive dissolution of the Western Zhou order and the descent into what history calls the Spring and Autumn period.
The Spring and Autumn period, a beautifully poetic name for a brutally unpoetic time. This total breakdown of the family holding company officially kicks off the next massive era of history.
All those regional managers, those franchises the Duke of Zhou so carefully set up,
They stopped pretending. They tore up the franchise agreements. They threw the employee handbook out the window. They started acting like independent rival corporations.
the decentralized network of allies became a fractured battleground of autonomous actors. The market corrected itself through violence.
A total free-for-all. They started forming strategic alliances, launching hostile takeovers, which in this context means literal bloody wars, expanding their market share by ruthlessly absorbing their weaker neighbors and backstabbing each other for leverage.
The polite boardroom meetings vanished.
Replaced by open chariot warfare on the plains, the illusion of family was dead, the rights and music were broken. It was just business now. Cutthroat, zero-sum, survival of the fittest business.
The transition from a monopoly held by faith and ritual to a fragmented market driven by pure force and real politics.
So let's recap this wild ride before we finish our drinks. You start with Startup Zhou, a hungry company that violently takes down the giant Legacy Shang.
The visionary founder dies, leaving a child CEO in a terrified boardroom.
But they are saved from the brink of disaster by a god-tier COO, the Duke of Zhou, who steps in, takes the heat, crushes a massive shareholder revolt led by his own brothers, and completely rewrites the company's operating system.
He built a masterpiece of structural organization, balancing decentralized physical management with a unifying psychological, cultural, and hierarchical code.
A masterpiece. A massive family holding company held together by the ultimate corporate culture. But it had that one bug. The generational dilution of trust. Time eroded the personal bonds.
The regional branches got too strong, headquarters got too lazy and weak, and the culture collapsed into an empty performance.
Liu Bengyu Huai. And finally, the whole thing fragmented into a chaotic landscape of cutthroat, competing businesses fighting for survival in the spring and autumn period.
The architecture failed, not because it was poorly designed for its time, but because human nature cannot be permanently codified.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? As you sit here and look at the world today, at the massive conglomerates that seem invincible, the institutions that seem permanent, they all think they've written the perfect operating system.
They all think their core values and their org charts will save them.
But they all have a bug somewhere.
Which leaves us with a lingering question to ponder as the ice finally melts in your glass. We've seen that the Duke of Zhou's incredibly designed system, arguably one of the most elegant social and political architectures in human history, ultimately failed for one simple, unavoidable reason. Human relationships naturally fade over time.
The intimacy of the founders cannot be inherited by the grandsons.
Trust does not scale. So if that is a fixed, unbreakable law of human nature, I leave you with this. Is it actually possible to build an institution, a company, or a society that can survive its own eventual success? Or are we all just writing operating systems that are destined, sooner or later, to crash?